What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to Community Permaculture Week 5. Glad you're with us. This week, we're going back to the foundation, talking about soils. I want to start, however, with the Anishinaabe or Ojibwe. They're sometimes known as creation myth, or one of them at least, that describes Turtle Island. I'm no expert in this. Please do your own research. But from what I've seen, there are a couple, various formulations of the myth. And one of them, a sky woman falls down, and another, there's a great flood, and there's a man left, and he's a sort of a god or something, and they're both, superhumans. And in either case, there's some superhuman that's there in this just giant water landscape or waterscape, and animals are trying to help this human out somehow. So a bunch of animals dive down to try to find earth to grab some mud to pull up to give them somewhere to live. And I think a bunch go down and a bunch die. Finally a muskrat goes down, brings back up handfuls of mud, dies in the process, but successfully makes it back to the surface. And that mud is then placed on the back of a turtle. And that turtle is essentially what we're on here, that turtle in that mud, in North America. North America, you can look at the, I think the tail as Mexico, and the two feet as like Florida and Baja, two back feet in the like Alaska and Newfoundland or Newfoundland or whatever as the front paws or something like that. I might be messing this up. Forgive me, it might be the reverse. But either way, we're floating on a giant turtle right now. And some people might say, oh, that sounds like a silly little kid story or a blah, blah, blah. Myths, if taken as nonfiction, of course, seem crazy in certain senses, but who knows? I don't know what's going on out here. But as a worldview, as a philosophical gesture, as a fable, as an allegory, which I believe, most myths are, I feel like it's a very sophisticated way to talk about many things, including what we're doing right now in the class. So as we transition from discussing animals and, essentially are animals potentially part of our regenerative future, specifically large grazing, domesticated animals that we have in abundance, that outnumber us. The idea of life and our terrestrial existence being founded on animal life, and both living and dead animal life, really to me drills home the point of what soils are all about, and the fact of that animal life connecting us with the water, or being the mediator between water and the geology of the actual mud of the earth, to me sounds like an incredibly sophisticated ecological awareness, a set of ecological basic principles. So soil is essentially a biological and not a geological, or not exclusively a geological phenomenon, right? Oftentimes we think of soil as just dirt. Soil is, however, made up of, dirt is not soil. Dirt is, just rock dust and maybe a couple particles of very dead and dry and oxidized organic matter, formerly organic. And soil, on the other hand, is a living, breathing organism that is full of dead animals and living animals. And the importance of both the muskrat, who sacrifices himself, so to speak, or herself, and the turtle, the living animal, the presence of both the dead and the living animals in the thing that gives us life, or rather the acknowledgement of those animals as these foundational beings that make our earthly life possible, seems to me like such a beautiful way to think about what's happening here, and so much, in some senses, more accurate than a lot of the sky god mythologies. Not to disrespect those in any sense. I think those are probably accurate too. I don't know enough probably about cosmology and ancient aliens and whatever to talk about how those myths are actually referring to some reality, whatever that means. But to understand that animals also connect water with this whole process, and we've heard the term, if you were paying attention to some of the videos earlier, the term biotic pump. That animal life is part of the process of moving water through soils and through ecosystems, living and dead animals do this. That acknowledgement is so beautiful to me, because sometimes, especially if, like me, you're maybe eating plant-based and you're learning about the problems that, CAFOs and giant factory animal farming are causing on the earth, you're, skeptical about, as you saw last week, some people are rightfully skeptical about the presence of 26 billion plus domesticated animals on the face of the earth. I want to make a point. It might seem obvious, but I think in the reading of this, it'll help us clarify some stuff. So this is from Bill Mollison's book, Permaculture, A Practical Guide for a Sustainable Future. Bill Mollison, Mollison. He is one of the quote-unquote founders of the permaculture concept, along with David Holmgren. Brilliant dude, funny old, weird, dirty old pirate kind of vibe. So, watch his videos with caution, but they're excellent. He's got a couple old TV specials, like from the 80s, where he's talking about different climates. Rad dude, rad book. He has the famous permaculture design manual. I believe this is basically just a repackaging of the permaculture design manual. In it, he says in chapter 3, Methods of Design, we can arrange any set of parts and design a system which may be self-destructive or which needs energy support. But by using the same parts in a different way, we can equally well create an harmonious system which nourishes life. It is in the arrangement of parts that design has its being and its function, and it is the adoption of a purpose which decides the direction of the design. Alright, so to put that super basically, it's not the animals, it's the how, right? It's also, as we saw the week before that, it's not the humans being here that are the problem. Oh, just too many humans, George Guidestones, or, complaining stand-up comedian in traffic that gets mad, it gets genocidal real quick when you start to think that population is the only issue. That's scarcity. If you have a scarcity mentality when thinking about this stuff, yeah, maybe it does seem like too many cows, too many people, gotta get rid of them, create a whatever situation or circumstance such that giant, massive population reduction is essentially our salvation. Obviously a very dangerous idea if you are a human and don't count yourself among the elite, and or if you are an animal and have been created for human enjoyment, and think you maybe deserve a life of some kind, of some dignity. So while I think we've redeemed both of those ideas last week, at least if you were paying attention to week 3, you notice that California Native Americans here essentially ran the state as a giant food forest, you could say. Instead of having the artificial boundary between, here's my fenced off land that I'm going to control and mow and till and chop everything down, and I'm going to make sure that it fits my specifications to grow the vegetables that I was growing in Europe, regardless of whether there's actually the same conditions here or not, and then that creates the wilderness out there, and then one of the legacies of that wilderness creation, that binary opposition, that unnecessary distinction between us and our livelihood here and those wild bad animals out there, then essentially creates a situation where even modern day conservationists are inheriting this legacy. Even well-meaning people who are like, yeah, we want to protect the animals and save the, blah, blah, blah. They're thinking through that paradigm, through that agricultural, civilizational paradigm of humans cause destruction, humans bad, therefore limit human access to places because humans being in there will cause inevitably harm. Understandable, and in certain regards, definitely true. But as a philosophy and as a overall approach to thinking about our environment and our relation with our environment, I think fatally flawed in certain regards, and dangerous even, and in the sense that it participates in that potentially genocidal concept of humanity and animals. We saw last week that there's some debate out there, but I am myself fairly convinced that we need to harness the power of, say, large grazing animals like cows to actually repair some of the damage that unwitting, greedy cowboys have done, right? Running too many cows across the land and leaving them for too long in certain places. Deserts have been created through the use of these by using, by giant animal concentrated feeding operations or whatever, we have created giant toxic zones and destroyed, ecosystems left and right. So agree, but really, I think one of the titles of that was "It's not the cow, it's the how," and Mollison's quote here fairly succinctly demonstrates that this principle applies to many things in life and in design. So anyways, enough blah blah on that. I hope y'all kind of see where I'm going with this idea of soils really being this mediating point, this fundamental foundational thing that we're going to go next week into the deeper foundation, right? The turtle is sitting on the water, and the water is also really the thing without which we could have no soil as we know it. So these 2 fulcrum weeks, right, in the middle of the course, weeks 5 and 6, are going back down to these foundational elements, and we're going to do a deep dive into soils this week. So let's run through some of the readings. Essentially the first, say, 5 videos are accessible, very watchable introductions to the basics of soil, and will get you a great sense of what it is, what it's made up of, what's going on in it, how, to some extent, how do we make it, or how do we encourage it or help it and nourish it, and its importance, really. It's, it seems obvious maybe, but it also is not something we all often think about, and it's something we are definitely, as a culture and society, callously destroying by many of our practices. So these first 5 will definitely, if you're not as familiar with the topic, will get you a great introduction. They're incredibly watchable. It's maybe 30 minutes to 40 minutes if you depending on which lists you're watching. The next 6 videos are all from this lady, Dr. Elaine Ingham's Soil Food Web School, and you'll see they're kind of directed towards farmers. There's like 30 seconds at the end of each video where they're explicitly talking to farmers. So you can skip through that if you need to. But it is interesting too, the things that are kind of different at each ending of like, why would this be useful for you, farmer? It kind of really explains it. So I found them interesting, but you can blow through those pretty quick. They're all very short. I want to zoom in on one of them that I think makes the point we're talking about beautifully, and is one of her ideas that seems to me, I'm not super well versed in this area yet, but seems to me to be her unique contribution to the developing field, the rapidly developing field of soil science, right? Just a little bit of background and context. I didn't mention this, but 2 kind of factoids that I've heard before. If you have like I don't know the exact, don't quote me on the exact numbers here, but like a gram of soil, you have more microorganisms in that than there are stars visible in our sky. Or I don't know if it was stars in the universe or something. It's some crazy number of microorganisms in very tiny amounts of soil. So the amount of life in healthy soil is astronomical. Another thing that makes that point, the biomass of living beings. I think I've seen numbers like even just worms under the ground, where there's, say, cows out in a decently healthy pasture. The biomass is 2 to 3 times minimum what the amount of cows are that are walking around on this pasture. So the just the weight of just the worms alone, not to speak of all the other things that are in there, already like is triple the weight of these giant cows that are walking around the land. So the life under our feet, the unseen contributors to our well-being, I think deserve a spotlight. So that's what we're doing this week, is spotlighting them. And back to this video, there's a little star next to it, I think, in the readings, if y'all have access to the to the readings. What I'm going to do is, this week I'm going to put these on my website as well. So even if you're not signed up for the class, you can still access these. If you're signed up for the class, you're obviously getting these directly sent to you. If you'd like to sign up, you're welcome to sign up. You get access to the Google Classroom as well. It's free, and you have extra resources on there. But I'm also going to put these on my website as well. So her video number 2 on nutrient cycling. This is her unique contribution, as I understand it, to recent soil science developments. Basically, one, let's start back. Why is it the soil food web, right? We talk about food chains a lot. We hear about food pyramids, trophic levels. A lot of those concepts are fairly unidirectional, right? They're like the sardine eats the little fish, or whatever. I'm making this up, but the plankton gets eaten by the anchovy. The anchovy eats the sardine eats the anchovy. The tuna eats the sardine. The dolphin eats the tuna. We eat the dolphin, God forbid, right? That's a unidirectional transfer of energy, right? And the trophic pyramid shows you at each level of transfer you lose you lose some power. So if we start eating algae, as we probably should, spirulina, chlorella are amazing, we're going back down to that first trophic level, and we're being very energy efficient by doing so. But that's not the point of what I'm saying. What the point is that underground, things are not so simple. Even above ground, things are not so simple. But underground in particular, things are more of a web of interacting parts, exchanging energy in all these different directions, things killing and eating other things, things feeding and supporting other things. There's just tons of energy exchanges happening. And what Dr. Elaine Ingeman and I think her husband and some other researchers kind of discovered or have brought to the forefront is that you can't just have, so there are these great bacteria and fungi, right? And they have these great symbiotic relationships with plants, and the plants will actually send signals to these bacteria or fungi to mine minerals, to bring, to make rocks, bioavailable vitamins essentially, or mineral pills for the plants. However, this is the part that they discovered, you can't just have those bacteria or fungi alone. They've done, isolation experiments where essentially, they have a sterile environment, it's just bacteria or just fungi or just bacteria and fungi that do that. And they discovered that you need different levels of predators consuming those bacteria or fungi, those miners that the plant sends signals to go get stuff. The plant can't directly, in a lot of cases, get the nutrients it needs from those bacteria. What it needs is a, say, protozoa eating that bacteria, digesting it, pooping it out or whatever, or dying itself in the process. And in that absorption and reconstitution of the nutrients or the minerals into a more bioavailable form, the plants then have access to them. So you need that double digestion in a sense, right? I could be misquoting her. This is, go look the stuff up, see what you think yourself. But as I understand it, in a way, that's saying what the Turtle Island myth says. You need both living and dead animals to make this thing that we have, that we live on, called soil, work, right? And that's kind of, right, it kind of makes us rethink things. And one, let's discuss the term predation, right? It's not just carnivores that are go out and, hunting other mammals, say, or whatever, to eat. It's also the cow that's eating the grass. It's predating on the grass, right? Especially if it eats the plant to the point of it dying. But in either way, you have one animal consuming, or one being consuming another being. That is a necessary part of life. Does that mean we need to not eat plant-based and eat the cows? I don't think so necessarily. There's a lot of, I'm still considering that debate and thinking through it. I'm still eating plant-based myself. I think if you're an indigenous person living in a culture or an area where that's your traditional way of getting food, and you have a responsible way of doing it, and or that's just that's how y'all do stuff, and or you're in an extremely cold or extremely hot environment where animals essentially are the only source of calories. They, the goats in the desert turn the thorny brush that no human could ever possibly consume into edible milk and flesh. I think, if we're dogmatic, doctrinaire vegans, I think it's kind of ignorant and dangerous. I think an acre of tofu, as I've said before, is more deadly than an acre of biodynamically farmed animal agriculture. There's a lot of evidence that shows that from what I've seen. So y'all make your own decision. You saw the evidence last week. But essentially that nutrient cycling depends on predation, depends on animal death, the muskrat, and living animals, the tortoise or the turtle. All right, that's kind of the basic two things. If you just watch those, you're in about an hour. If you say you already know a lot about that stuff and you're a deep diver, you want to go deeper, I have then 5 videos that are kind of deep dives, and this is about a little over maybe 2.5 hours. Again, from my favorite thinker in this business, Toby Hemingway. He's now passed, but amazing writer, amazing thinker. I love his lectures. He has a couple great things in there. One, a extended lecture diving into soil. Another, a very quick kind of what is soil. If you don't have a full hour and 20 minutes, just watch the 4-minute what actually is soil. And then there's a little article if you want to dive in, what does what in the soil. It's the third part of a 3-part article that's really, it's a great series. It gets super cosmic for the first 2, and then I think he passed before he finished the 3rd one. And then, but it'll give you some directions and some detailed stuff on elements in the soil, carbon, etc. Then there's and why carbon is useful for life. It's fascinating stuff. Then there's all things soil taxonomy. So this is super soil geek if you want to really get into it. This is like, you know, characterizing different types of soil. There's a global soil taxonomy map, so you could look at like kind of where's what, where am I sitting, what sort of soil might I have or tend to have in this area. And then I included a secret treasure in there, and it's called The Secret of Eldorado. It's about an hour documentary on the legacy of civilizations in the Amazon that they have left us, right? That their pyramids have been totally covered up by the jungle. But one of the best bits of evidence, in addition to some giant kind of earthworks that you can see from, you know, like macro scale, you know, certain scanners that can go under the jungle, it's this living soil, right? So the foundational thing we're talking about is soil is not just geology, it's also and primarily biology. That's what distinguishes from dirt. What the civilizations that lived in the Amazon did was they theorized through their trash, their burnt, you know, charcoal and their clay pots and stuff, and their refuse into certain areas, and those areas, or they might have done it intentionally, we're not sure. That's one of the hypotheses, so they could have been way ahead of us and doing this intentionally. And it could have been a combo, right? That always happens. People accidentally do something and stumble upon it and then start to use that technology intelligently. But they created soil that regrows itself. So why it's called terra preta, it means like ready earth, I believe, in Portuguese, and it's ready for gardening. It's ready. A lot of the Amazonian rainforest soil is notoriously poor in nutrients. Tropical soils tend to burn through nutrients very fast because there's a lot of heat and therefore there's a lot of life. So whatever falls to the ground gets kind of eaten up and, you know, disappears very quickly. So it's hard to hold nutrients in the soil. But because of the charcoal, which houses bacteria, charcoal is essentially carbon condominiums for bacteria, and because of the clay, which enables, there's something called cation exchange capacity, if you really want to get into geeky stuff. It essentially enables electrical signals to be sent through soil better, and electrical or exchanges of energy, I believe. So don't quote me on that. Look it up. Cation like ion, cat ion exchange capacity. I'm sure there's a stupid cat meme about that already. If you're a plant geek and a cat geek and that meme doesn't exist, please make it. But terra preta is this super fertile stuff that they mine it out, and then it starts to like regrow and spread. So it's almost like a living being, right? Soil has these characteristics that we see in biology. It grows, it breathes, it needs water, it needs to drink. It has, you know, certain colorations. It changes, it moves even. In this case, the terra preta kind of deepens itself. So, you know, and that is not one single organism. That's a collection of tons of organisms and tons of matter and organisms moving that matter and those nutrients and minerals around. So that's a great little documentary if y'all are interested, you want to geek out. And then finally, last but not least, I promise you every week we're going to have something you can do locally, some kind of action you can take. And this week we're looking at some local heroes in Long Beach, LB Community Compost, who, even if you don't live in a house where you have access to, you know, be able to compost, even if you don't, you know, have, even if you do have that space and you're like, I don't really want rats, you can go drop your food scraps off with them. I believe some of these services do pickup. I don't know if they do yet, but some services do pickup. I know Long Beach is getting green bins soon, so we will have an outlet for that stuff as well. But LB Community Compost has been here doing it, and they have been turning food scraps, instead of putting them in the landfill where they, you know, create a bunch of methane and contribute to greenhouse gases and, you know, anaerobically decompose in sort of toxic ways. They take it and oxidatively decompose it and turn it into, or primarily oxidatively, and turn it into usable soil. So you'll see in some of these videos, if you note, like they'll say, it takes 500 years to create 2 centimeters of topsoil. And that is true, and that should indicate to us what a horrifically horrible thing we're doing by indiscriminately wasting that gift of nature. We have, from what I hear, because of all this topsoil destruction that we've undergone, or that we've done, 60 years of harvests left, maybe. And that's that's a horrifying picture, right? I think so. Reversing that, what's great about compost, and if you saw Kiss the Ground, you saw this. If you saw The Need to Grow, you also saw some people using algae and biochar very intelligently to build soil rapidly. And compost can help us build soil rapidly, rebuild, rehydrate, restore, repair, bring new life into what was dirt, or what we have created as dirt. So yeah, so all the basics of covering your soil, of having sort of contour in order to prevent erosion, or having swales and different things, so you don't have water just rushing off your property, but instead sinking in. So you have plant roots, green cover, you have mulch, other things that help the soil not die. Compost is the thing that then, after we've let that soil die, we can revive it with. And we still need to do those other things, but compost can help us make soil much quicker than that natural 500-year process for 2 centimeters, right? We can make inches and inches at a time by just using the stuff that we already produce as waste. So our yard waste, our urine, our poop, even human manure, is a really important thing. If you're eating healthy and you do it for long enough, it just turns into totally safe dirt. Yeah, so anyways, that's this week. It's on soil. Hope y'all dig it. Enjoy the videos. Let me know what you think. Appreciate you if you made it this far. Good looking out, trooper. Yeah, holler with questions or other videos that y'all might want, and enjoy. Peace, y'all.